And I think the last 5 or 10 years have been about data stores and wallets and, me having my own data. But there's some new protocols coming out that you can get all the benefits of decentralization without needing a blockchain at all. Agents plus the ability to settle payments can be a kind of a new wave of what might be coming in the next 10 years. Because Apple's agents and Anthropic's agents are going to have a fiduciary responsibility to the platform, not to me.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs, and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Okay, Jamie Smith is here today. He's the CEO and founder of Customer Futures, a company focused on digital identity and customer-controlled personal data. He also publishes the Customer Futures newsletter, that I very much recommend, and to which we'll provide a link in the show notes. Jamie has previously worked at Evernym, a well-known early leader in the self-sovereign identity world. He's also worked at Deloitte, BT, or Ctrl-Shift in his early days before embarking on various recent projects, always in the same space. With him, we're going to revisit the whole idea of digital wallets and digital identity, but this time from the point of view of personal AI agents, a really hot topic in the past few months. Let's go for it. Jamie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We've spoken, we've met when I was in London. I really enjoyed it. And then you've kept on building on top of these ideas, agency and control, things that I'm very passionate about. Where are we now? What's the most exciting thing for you now in this space?
There's a funny thing with innovation where you can't know everything. And so either you know what will happen with certainty, but you don't know what it means. You don't know. So a regulation comes in, or there's going to be a technical breakthrough, but you don't know what the impact will be. Or you know exactly that something will happen on a specific date, and you'll say, well, actually, how do we understand what's going to happen after that? We don't know what's going to happen. So I think one of the reasons I've been so optimistic about this shift is I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I think directionally we can be really clear that individuals are going to be more empowered with their data. If you look at every data protection and regulation, the technology getting better and better at the edge. Before it wasn't possible for individuals to control their data. And when you talked about digital trust, it was about an organization making the privacy policy more readable, right? Or getting the checkbox better, but it was still happening on the business side. And the reason I'm optimistic is things are going, technology is getting cheaper and faster and better on the customer side. And that means directionally we can be sure that it's only going to become more useful for individuals to have their data. And so then the question is, okay, what does that mean? In terms of what am I most excited about? I was actually just posting recently, people talk about how payments is the kind of killer app for identity, and what's the utility? Because having an identity is kind of, nobody really cares about that thing. It's like I have a document, I cross a border every so often. Most companies don't need to know who I am. They care, what I want, my preferences, my payment, and so on. So payments is the killer app for identity. And I think the last 5 or 10 years have been about data stores and wallets and, me having my own data. But there's been a challenge getting adoption. Like, why will people have it? They don't want to manage their data. You know, single digit number of people care about managing their data in a spreadsheet, using conditional formatting, because that's the only tool that people have for those things. But once there's utility, then we can create value for the data. We can actually do something with the data. And that's where AI and AI agents specifically are going to help. So the punchline, I suppose, is the thing I'm excited about is AI agents becoming the killer app for digital wallets. Because now I can actually not only have the data, but I can act on it. And it's not just a pie chart of tell me how much I spent on coffee last month. It's please give me recommendations on where my family should go on holiday next year. Please cancel all the subscriptions that I've forgotten about. Please prioritize my inbox and my messages, not just for things that are important, the people I last spoke to, but the people that are the things that are contextually relevant. I heard a great expression that your email inbox is your to-do list organized by someone else. And I need an AI agent just to make sense of my WhatsApp, my LinkedIn, my Telegram, my Signal, my email, right? And I miss stuff. We all do. We're busy. And I want an AI agent just to help orchestrate that stuff. And that's where I'm most excited and interested.
It is true. 5 years ago, we thought about control, and the best breakthroughs we had, a few apps that did work for a number of years, they were all about visualizing data. And now we finally have a purpose. So if we look at identity, before we move into what the agent can do for you, so then there's this key piece of identity. And we've had an interview here with Adrian Dirk a few months ago. The case for using a blockchain-based identity had not been strong enough, as he explained. Then I spoke recently to Dan Stone from Icebreaker, and he made a very good case for it. Where are you?
I think there's, the decentralized technology has been a natural counter argument or counterweight to having things centralized. There's too much centralized, there's too much control. And the Web3 maxis, right, the people who, not your keys, not your crypto, have swung entirely the other way. I want to be my own bank, which is crazy, right? Because as society, we need governance, we need rules, we need to understand what you can and can't do. We need liability models, right? All that stuff. And so I think there was in 2014 to 2022, there's kind of this real swing the other way of like, let's decentralize all the things. Even in the identity world, like, well, if my identity is not on my device, under my control, someone can turn me off, all that stuff. And I think there's starting to be pragmatism creeping back in that says, what does minimum viable centralization look like? Like, how can we have things that are pragmatic and scale, but that have some of the benefits of decentralization? So that's one angle. The other is people are also recognizing that blockchains arguably are also more lock-in, right? I've got to be on this ledger or that ledger. We're building another ecosystem. And guess what? There's an explosion of ledgers and tokens and coins and these little ecosystems where I've got to use your signature scheme. So, there still needs to be, even though things are decentralized, I'm still having to move, value or my interaction across these different ledgers or these different blockchain DLT ecosystems. So there are some, I'm going to say bleeding edge, they're not there yet, but there's some new protocols coming out that you can get all the benefits of decentralization without needing a blockchain at all. In fact, some of those that were championing the original SSI, so self-sovereign identity movement, are saying, no, blockchains are more lock-in. That's a bad idea. What we need is a protocol that means we can get all the key management and all that kind of complicated stuff and the benefits of that without needing another single blockchain. So that's another angle. But one of the last things I'll point to, which I think is interesting, is in fact, I'll say two things. When you look at, if you zoom out for the last 10 years, all the blockchain labs, studios, garages, accelerators, there are usually 2, 3, or 4 use cases. the kind of results. If you stand back and close one eye, the first one was cross-border settlement. It's reasonable. The second one was supply chain, and the third one was identity. But if you look at cross-border settlement and supply chain, there are identity problems. So really, it's this whole thing of decentralized trust and not having a central intermediary give you the identifier or the reputation of who's involved. So again, back to the first thing we talked about, like directionally, centralization is needed for some things, right? For administration, for liability, for auditability. But there might be some new technologies coming that mean we can get some of those benefits without needing a centralized controller. So I suppose that's the little story. But there's a really interesting thing going on around the post-web. It's a movement that's being kind of pushed forward by a company called Outlier Ventures, a guy called Jamie Burke. And they started in 2014-15 saying, it's all going to be blockchain and AI, like proper buzzword bingo, right? Blockchain and AI. But what they're now saying is, Web 1 was read, Web 2 was write, and Web 3 was own. Well, with AI agents, what happens next? And what we get is they would say delegate is the word. So read, write, own, delegate. That needs identity and it needs portable data, it needs all that good stuff. But that means the web was designed and built for people filling out forms in big centralized, it's become centralized platforms. And the idea of maybe we move to the post-web.
Oh, I've heard of this, of course. Gandhi has
Well, yeah, exactly,
mentioned
right?
this.
But the reason I'm linking this back to blockchain is like, depending on who you pay attention to, there's either 1 million active wallets, Web3 wallets in the world, or 30 million, but it's like a tiny, tiny number, and it's not had the business impact, it's not the economic impact. But if you reframe blockchain as a back-end transformation, then we can have AI agents acting with and for individuals and organizations and settling stuff, managing supply chains, thinking about identity in this new way. So there's some threads there you can pull together to say, where am I on blockchains? I think there's an identity movement that's moving, post blockchain, post DLT. I think for some things, like some of the public key cryptography, blockchain is not a bad answer for some public registries, rather than doing things centralized using public key infrastructure, PKI. But the post-web is where I'm starting to think, Jamie Burke and Outlier Ventures might be right, that agents plus the ability to settle payments can be a kind of a new wave of what might be coming in the next 10 years.
It is true. Everything we've built, our interfaces, our phones, the shape of our phones, it's all built around websites, and the web and the internet and the way we network has been built around our limitations, our senses. So if you were to go behind the scenes, then you will be using all these APIs. But someone said, or whichever systems for interoperability, and it's data to data, machine to machine, so you just use an agent. But someone said the other day that this was even harder than the human-built world, and I really like that. The fact that you've got agents that can go cut through that and be used to dealing with the human-built UI, it's actually better because they struggle even more when we try to find governance and compatibility and interoperability at the data layer.
Yeah.
So if we combine all of this and we set ourselves in this future, in 5 years, we've got a new kind of interface with the world. And the world is made of other people that we interact with. For example, as you were saying, email. And the world is made of data, systems, the environment, and the agent is for us to deal with that world. So it's to be productive in the work environment, to socialize. What kind of device or what kind of agent is the best possible agent in your view?
I mean, the honest answer is I don't know. I think things are going to get adopted when they create value. And wallets on their own weren't creating value, except for people who are wanting to manage cryptocurrency. Wallets on their own, even having an app with a proof of doctor on it, it's kind of useless unless I can present it somewhere, unless I can use it, right? So we need acceptance, just like in payments. Having a credit card is useless. Having the acceptance network is the important part. So part one of your question about, where the agent's going to show up and which one's going to be valuable, I think it's where they solve problems for individuals. But that won't happen until we have governance. Anthropic's got a product called Claude, and they released, right, and they did release 3.5 Sonnet, which has AI agent, which can run in the browser. So it can see the page, it can click on a button, it can type the text, and you can give it an instruction, make a booking at a restaurant in New York on Thursday, right? So it can, at the best restaurant for me. So it can go in and type in restaurants in an area. It'll then look at the Google search results. It'll click on it. It'll then pull up the address, go to the website, pull up the address, stick that into a map, work out the distance. It can do all these things, right? It breaks the task into small, bite-sized chunks that one agent can go and fix. So Google just, at their big announcement day, announced Google Mariner, which is their version of this. And in the release, they're going to great lengths to say this is experimental. It's a research prototype. They're playing around, but they limit. You cannot enter billing information, payment details. Right? It can't sign contracts. It can't make a transaction for you. And that's because there isn't governance yet, which really means that they say it's about control. The individual needs to be in control. But I think that's really just about liability and governance, right? We can't, because fraud is going to balloon once these agents can start making payments. So where I'm going with this is, what am I excited about in agents? There's going to be natural limits, right? So technical limits, speed limits. For example, in the AI agent that Google released, it can only act if the browser is front and center. If you change tab or change program, the agent won't be working anymore. And they say that's for control and visibility. It's good. These are baby steps. So we need the UI UX to be sorted. We need the liability and governance model to be sorted about what an agent can and can't do. So people are saying these dreams of, it can go and make the recommendation of the flight and plan my whole holiday and book, and not until we've cracked the UI UX, the commercial model, the governance layer, how liability is going to work, right? And my answer to some of that is, if it's being run by a big centralized organization, that will be good because we'll have bounds to it. So it'll work within the Apple interface or within the Google interface. But it'll also be prevented because their compliance teams are going to say, no way will I let my agent run these things. Okay. So back to the very first point, directionally, it makes sense for the individual to have agents that work on their behalf, but we've got a really big problem around governance and around identity. Again, I wrote in the Customer Features newsletter yesterday. I pointed to a comment. There's an identity company that does a wallet decentralized on blockchain called Privado ID. And one of the co-founders, Evan McMullen, said a great thing, which is accountability. AI is going to need accountability, but accountability needs identity. It's totally true. And so my bet is that agents are naturally going to be decentralized things because they will be limited in what they can do unless they're decentralized. But we can't have a centralized identity infrastructure, which means that wallets and credentials are going to be, the icebreaker thing is going to be more important. And you can start to see how it comes together. You can start to see how agents that are running on my device, run by me, that have a fiduciary responsibility to me. Because Apple's agents and Anthropic's agents are going to have a fiduciary responsibility to the platform, not to me, and to the stakeholders, right? So there's a guy in California called Daza Greenwood who's writing about fiduciary responsibility in agents, and he is a legal expert and a technical expert and AI expert. I'd recommend the listeners and the watchers to check out Daza Greenwood, who's writing papers on this stuff. So this is where I think it's going to happen. It's going to create value, but only when we take these barriers out of the way, and that's going to, it'll take time. But I think, in 2 years we won't make much progress. In 10 we will.
So the agent is going to be agreeing to terms and conditions on your behalf.
Well, so I mean, again, it's baby steps. So the analogy I've been thinking about is, autonomous cars, self-driving cars, they still have a steering wheel. Why? Because we have retrofitted the autonomous capability to an existing vehicle. Right, we've not redesigned a car to be completely autonomous yet, mainly because of regulation. It's possible today, right? For governance, liability, and so agents are going to be retrofitted to the things we have. That's why we have them as browser extensions. They don't need to be a browser extension, but we have them as a browser extension. We have them on our devices, on our laptops, because of UI UX. But it won't yet be able to sign contracts because of the compliance teams won't let them. Right? They won't let. How do we know it was Jamie? How do we know it's? They have a problem right now saying, how do we know it's Jamie signed the contract? Let alone if it was Jamie's AI agent and not someone else's AI agent. So we're going to need wallet and identity infrastructure to make it possible before the compliance teams will accept a contract. However, some baby steps towards it. One is my AI agent can look through the terms and conditions and make sense of it for me before I sign. So, there's a great thing. We're at like peak T's and C's at the moment, right? I think something like, I'm going to make the number up, but like TikTok's T's and C's, I think takes something like 13 hours to read at normal reading speed, because they're written for lawyers by lawyers. We're reaching peak T's and C's, peak consent fatigue, because I have to swat away the consent, which I'm not. It's not really meaningful consent, not really meaningful T's and C's. So, my agent's going to start making sense of those things. Now that's like having a steering wheel in the car. It's like it's kind of a little baby step towards having an agent sign it for me, but I'm going to be a bit more aware. But the second point I was going to make about consent and contracts is, again, this guy Dazza Greenwood, who I encourage you to go and check out. He set up the law program at MIT, so law.mit.edu. He drafted or helped draft some regulation that is already in place in the 52 states that has language that permits an agent or a computer system to sign a contract, that is already in law right now.
Finally, we're going to be able to have a distillation. What is it that you really want of me? What kind of liability you want to take off your back and pass on to me, and let my system see what I am ready to accept. Contracts are going to be much more efficient.
Totally right. And better for transparency, better for accountability. And the thing I was looking up just while that I wanted to remember was, this thing is called the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, the UETA. And it's an existing legal framework and rules for electronic signatures, automated transactions, and the attribution of acts of electronic agents or autonomous agents. So this stuff, like I said, we're putting these pieces slowly together, and I think it's going to make it. The foundations are being put in place. The car with the steering wheel with the autonomous software. It starts to just help me with the lanes, and then it helps me reverse, and then it can start helping me, navigate across the city.
Yeah.
So right now we're putting an agent into a browser. Right now we have basic regulation around electronic transactions and document signing. We can start to see how they build together, which is why we come full circle to where I think we're going, which will be wallets and agents acting on behalf of the individual with a fiduciary responsibility to me. Probably a commercial model that's around freemium, or I'm paying for the service. And that organizations are going to have to, this is my favorite point of all this, just to wrap up. Organizations are going to get whiplash because they have spent the last 10 years, 20 years stopping the bots coming in, right? They have been putting up all the barriers, all the alligators and the barbed wire and the checks and the mother's maiden name and all that stuff to stop the bots coming in. And now they're going to do a 180. Because now they have to check, is it a bot that's official? Is it a bot that's been approved by Jamie? Does it have consent to act on Jamie's behalf? So guess what? We need wallets and credentials and authorization, and these things we have the raw material for it, but that's what's going to be the challenging next phase, I think.
I love that. Thank you, Jamie.
You're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk.
Okay, that's all for today. Follow us on Blue Sky, and in the Masters of Privacy Altogether profile, you will find the starter pack, which includes the feeds of all of our past guests. There is also a Masters of Privacy LinkedIn channel, which I invite you to follow, where you will find links to our transcripts, cheat sheets, and other surprises every now and then. Our main website is mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.